Danger Dolan. Alright, so WoW is a continually evolving game and it's way different now than it was, say, 10 years ago. There have been many improvements since vanilla, like the LFG system removing trade spam and the overhaul to talent trees, even though it was controversial, but it did remove cookie cutter builds. Now Veldrin, over at the DD Guide subreddit, suggested a list of 5 desired features for WoW, and I quote, "Blizzard has introduced a lot of new features the past few expansions, and they have many more they want to bring in." So with Warlords of Draenor comes player housing, which was highly requested in the form of garrisons. But there are still many more things players want in the game, even some they touched on at the last BlizzCon, but aren't the exact thing that we wanted. And let's start off with number 5. So with Warlords come the removal of toys and heirlooms from your bag space, and personally, I think heirlooms were fine before because you can send it to multiple characters. It was just a bit of a hassle when you had to find an heirloom and you had to go through all of your characters just to locate it. And the same goes with toys. I mean, I just personally delete toys because unless I find 1 or 2 that I find, extremely cool, the rest are just a waste of bag space. So the fact that they're removing the necessity to have this stuff in your bags is good. It helps the problem, but by no means does it solve the issue. As Farahlon on Reddit says, you still use materials and potions and flasks constantly in your bags and they fill up space. You got account bound items like the Timeless Isle tokens, the crafting mats, and above all, transmog pieces which pretty much eat up all of your bank space. Something like void storage helped in the short term, but it's kind of garbage that you need to pay in order to get your stuff out, which is mostly to deter people from using it constantly, so you put things that you're going to keep permanently into that bank. But the real fix to the problem would be UIs for pretty much everything, just like it is with pets and mounts and soon to be heirlooms and toys. As long as you have certain things that don't need to be placed into a UI, like grey items and scraps, maybe herbs and minerals, as long as you can keep those when you are adventuring and you actually got something in your bags, that makes sense. But things that you're going to be using constantly and keeping your bags permanently, most of the time there's no real need to limit people's abilities to have all this stuff. Of course, they can't just whack in bigger bags because that's just an absurd amount of space. As soon as you press B to open your bag, suddenly your whole fucking screen is filled with bag space. I mean, even when you use your bank right now, if you have all 7 of the bank slots open and you whack in a bunch of bags that have a lot of space, then suddenly every time you open your bank and your bags at the same time, all of the space has to shrink to actually fit in your screen. Now the reason they can't fix the default bag, which is only like 12 or 16 slots or something like that, the reason they haven't even changed it at this point is because it's hardwired into the engine. As I mentioned before, this game is between 9 and 10 years old, and the amount of work they would have to go into actually fixing that tiny little problem doesn't seem worth it. So this isn't just a problem for people who have like a lot of stuff, a lot of junk that they like to carry around. Like, I don't personally collect stuff, but I'm always running out of bag space as soon as I go herbing or mining, or as soon as I do a few quests and they give me a bunch of rewards that I have to sell. And I'm totally fine with that, except that there's a lot of stuff in my bags that I have to keep there, like flasks, food buffs, and enchants, and another gear set. It would go a long way if they could solve that permanently in the future. And now let's move on to most desired feature number 4. So in the Warlords of Draenor announcement at BlizzCon, we saw a brief glimpse of something like the dance studio for garrisons. And now back in BlizzCon 2010, they confirmed that they'd already completed a bunch of new dances for the old races, but they were just looking for a way to package them all up in one big feature. And Ghostcrawler mentioned that they really need a gameplay element, like the barbershop wasn't very interesting. Even though it was useful for customizing a character, you wouldn't go back there all the time to do something. On the other side of the spectrum, you've got pet battles where you collect the pets and then you can actually do things with them. They want to have the same kind of system with dances. So it is more than likely that they are going to put Dance Studio into the garrisons, otherwise they are teasing sons of bitches. Although what I imagine they will do is possibly they'll put it into a patch, one giant patch, make it the dance patch. They'll introduce the studio, they'll implement a lot of new dances for all the old races, and then the raid for that tier will be centered around dancing. Just like Hygen from Naxxramas, in order to defeat him, you'll have to dance a lot. I'm very much looking forward to that raid. Now people love new dances. When I first started playing, I would slash dance every character just for the lols. It's probably the most well animated part of your character's persona. And it's also a quirky little Blizzard thing, like when you click the sheeps and they explode. People want this, I want this, who doesn't want this? They're teasing it, we want it, it better be in Warlords. And now let's move on to number 3. Professions are one of the last remaining original features in WoW that have not seen a significant redesign. In fact, apart from introducing a few new professions like jewel crafting and also making it easier to level up, say, mining by making it so you can just stay in Pandaria and keep mining the same nodes over and over, instead of having to go back to the old world to fly around and not find mineral nodes. But professions as they are have not changed. They're still a cramped little window. They are very hard to navigate because the old profession recipes are highlighted in bold and it's hard to find the ones you want. Sometimes the thing you want is grayed out. It's just a horrible experience, and I didn't like it from the very inception of WoW, and I hate it today. However, professions are still useful and relevant and incentivized, such as the Sky Golem, where everyone was saving up in order to build these things. The reason professions are so outdated is if you have a look at something like Star Wars The Old Republic or Neverwinter, they have a queue-based profession systems that don't take you out of the game. You just click a button, you have someone else go along and do their thing, and then you reap the benefits just by remembering to do it. It's not as interactive, but it's also not a pain in the ass. And in the Old Republic, you could just go along and collect little minerals if you wanted. You didn't have to use the queue system. But it helped if you didn't want to bother with that. And that's going along with the new time game system, which is infamous now if you've played Dungeon Keeper. But when used well, it's actually quite nice. So eventually, professions in WoW need to be fixed. I was appalled to see that they didn't even address the issue at BlizzCon, but maybe they're just saving it for some future expansion, the Profession expansion, where the final boss is a mineral node with a bad temper, surrounded by a fortress of herbs, and you have to cook up your legendary chicken wing. And now let's move on to number 2. So what do I mean by legacy servers? Well, basically realms dedicated to separate expansions, i.e. a vanilla realm, a Burning Crusade realm, places you can go to see old content in its prime with other players that want to do the same. So someone asked about this at BlizzCon 2013, and they received the infamous reply, you don't want that because there are so many problems that were in the game back then and we are not going to fix them. To which people replied, nuh-uh, you're an idiot. So right now, in the game, you can go back to do old content, but there's no challenge involved because you're so overgeared or so overleveled, unless you organize a Wrath-only raid team with the appropriate gear from the Lich King expansion. And even then, you have to have at least 9 other people who are willing to commit to a raid team that will do that content, which is very difficult. So some people love the pre-Cataclysm world, and some people never even saw the story that unfolded there. So it may be alright to let people actually go back and see all this old stuff on their own, quote, private servers. However, there are problems with this, and it might fragment the player base. If you have all kinds of different expansion servers, maybe people will stop going onto the new flashiness, which is at this point Pandaria, and they might hang around on one of those older servers with a bunch of their friends. Suddenly you're diluting the raiding pool because everyone's going back there. And then suddenly everyone's living in the past and they'll be expecting updates and Blizzard to take care of them, when in reality, a lot of stuff was broken back then, like in BC for that brief period where if you didn't roll a Ret Paladin as a DPS, you were doing it wrong. However, people want this, and I wouldn't mind seeing it as well because I've played on private servers with older expansions at their prime and it is quite fun. So maybe they should put it into the game, maybe they shouldn't. If I was Blizzard, I wouldn't do it, but I understand why people want it. And now let's move on to the most requested feature in WoW. So character scaling means you will be able to scale your character's level or his gear eye level down to do old content at its intended difficulty, or to play with friends who happen to be leveling up or don't have as good gear as you. I have a comment here from Farahlon which I think sums up what I mean. Currently, a player with no experience bonuses has zero incentive to finish questing in a zone because they will be able to progress to the next zone about 75% through. Players are also funneled into the outdated Outland Northrend zones after level 58, effectively travelling back in time and then jumping forward after level 80. How do you change this? By make players scale with the zones, and rewards and drops scale with player levels. For example, if a level 20 character enters a level 50 zone, have his or her stats multiplied by a set amount so that he or she can kill mobs and complete quests there, while also downgrading the experience and gold rewards he/she can gain in a zone to be equal to what level 20 zones would offer. Replace the item rewards and random drops with level appropriate items, or make the item rewards stats be based upon the character's level upon completing the quest. This way players have no incentives to leave a zone before completing anything. It would break up the monotone linear questing experience as players could level anywhere they wanted. So at the moment, the tech exists to do scaled content like leveling or dungeons or raids. You can see it in challenge modes where they scale back your gear eye level to be appropriate to the difficulty of that challenge mode dungeon. There was also a small period, maybe a couple of months ago, where you could scale yourself down in instances to be the appropriate level for that instance. People went into Blackrock depths and they were scaled down to level 40 or whatever it is. And they weren't able to use certain abilities because obviously if you're not that high level you can't do them, so they were like grayed out. So Ghostcrawler heavily hinted this was forthcoming back before patch 5.4 was announced and released, but it was canned. I personally asked about this at BlizzCon, and they mentioned that they can do it, they can scale you down, but they need a reward scheme for instances. Whether or not it would be even possible to scale yourself down in the open world remains debatable. However, with the forthcoming ability to purchase level 90s, is there any point anymore? If you want to level with friends, you just say, we'll shell out a bit of money and you can instantly go to level 90. The only other use there is if you want to do all dungeons or raids at the appropriate level without having to level an alt, which just makes you a bit lazy. But the people want it, including myself. I would absolutely love the ability to scale yourself down or up, whether it be with eye level or whether it be with your actual level. There is a vast amount of content in WoW that is currently not being used, such as raids with abilities that would still be difficult to this day. So I do hope that it makes its way into this game eventually. Anyway, that is it for this discussion. As for next week's topic, it is over at reddit.com/r/theDD guides. I will link it down below. It is for the top 10 best zones in WoW. Only the best. I know the topic says best and worst zones. Only post about the best zone, and I may include that comment into the next video. That's it. Have a good one.